The Killing Curse, Avada Kedavra. One of the three unforgivable curses, this dark spell is the ultimate symbol of disregard for life. Feared for its infamous reputation, the mere utterance of the words that comprise its incantation would send shockwaves of fear through the hearts of most in the wizarding world. But my question is, why isn't it used more often? No, I don't want it to be used more often, but it does feel a little underutilized in the series, given how powerful it truly is. Sure, it's an unforgivable curse, but what's really stopping a dark wizard from using it? Especially one that's already been to Azkaban and embraced a life of crime. Why risk losing a duel when you can end it with one simple spell? I mean, it's unblockable and irreversible, the perfect weapon. Today we'll be diving into 5 unique reasons for why Avada Kedavra isn't used more in the wizarding world. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Before we dive into the minutiae of why Avada Kedavra isn't used more often by the more dark magic inclined members of Wizarding Society, let's first address why it isn't used by the general populace. Though we don't have an exact date, the record books indicate that the curse was invented as early as the Middle Ages, sometime between the 5th and 15th century. The curse itself is generated by uttering the incantation Avada Kedavra, which then creates a blindingly intense green bolt of light capable of instantly killing the victim upon impact. The spell serves a simple purpose. It puts an end to the victim's life. And for many centuries, this powerful spell could be freely used by the wizarding population. However, in the year 1717, Avada Kedavra was finally outlawed and deemed unforgivable by the Ministry of Magic, alongside 2 other curses, Crucio, the Torture Curse, and Imperio, the Mind Control Curse. These curses were deemed unforgivable because of their sadistic nature, and the general consensus among wizardkind was that these spells were too powerful and cruel to be used freely in the wizarding world. The capacity to torture people, control them against their will, and kill them with a single incantation was just not something that could be left unrecognized or unpunishable in society. And so, when legislation was finally passed by the ministry to name these 3 curses unforgivable, the strictest penalties were put in place and attached to their use. Utilizing one of these 3 curses just one time could land you a life sentence to Azkaban. And this singular deterrent, albeit a strong one, was enough for most in wizarding society. Of course, unless the witch or wizard performing the curse was underage and under the trace, there's no way for the ministry to even detect that these curses are being used. However, if you were suspected of a crime and went to trial, they would eventually be able to check your wand and confirm whether or not you had cast the spell. And this is probably what stopped most criminals, besides the truly crazy ones, from using the spell. But for a wizard that's already committed himself to a life of crime, jail time in Azkaban is hardly a deterrent. So why not use them? I've narrowed this down to a few reasons. 1. It's not that easy to cast. If Fake Moody's Defense Against the Dark Arts lessons taught us anything, it's that in order to cast any of the unforgivable curses properly, you need sufficient power behind them. Avada Kedavra is a curse that needs a powerful bit of magic behind it. You could all get your wands out and point them at me and say the words, and I doubt I'd get so much as a nosebleed. But that doesn't matter. I'm not here to teach you how to do it. What this means is that it's not necessarily accessible for just anyone. Just because you know the incantation, it doesn't mean that you can cast the spell effectively. However, to this point, I would argue that most, if not all of Death Eaters, do have enough magical power to cast it. But there is another bottleneck. In order to master any of the unforgivable curses, you must fundamentally align yourself with what the curse is trying to achieve. You need an unyielding desire to cast the spell. This is referenced by Bellatrix in the Order of the Phoenix. Never used an unforgivable curse before, have you, boy? You need to mean them, Potter. You need to really want to cause pain, to enjoy it. Righteous anger won't hurt me for long. I'll show you how it's done, shall I? And what this means is that you need to possess a deep, unrelenting desire to end a life. Which brings me to my next point: moral considerations and stigma in society. The unforgivable curses are considered unforgivable not just because of their effects, but because they represent a fundamental breach of ethical principles. They are designed to cause extreme suffering, eliminate personal autonomy, and take life without justification. And so mustering the unrelenting desire to end a life is not as straightforward as it may seem, even for a Death Eater. Uttering this incantation bears a certain weight, and even among dark wizards, this spell has a connotation of irredeemable evil. There are dark witches and wizards out there that are evil through and through, like Voldemort or Bellatrix Lestrange, but there are also just followers that lack the same level of conviction or malice required to cast a spell like this. These other dark wizards, while certainly complicit in dark deeds, may be motivated by fear, ambition, or pity.
Not only is China's aviation industry one of the fastest growing in the world, it's also set to become the biggest domestic market over the next 2 decades. On top of that, they have also recently been designing and building aircraft in a bid to provide a competitor for Airbus and Boeing on the world stage. You probably know about the Comac C919, their narrow-body challenger, but today we are going to take a look at their newest offering to the market. But China's impact on the aviation industry doesn't stop there. It also covers new GPS systems and even hypersonic travel. So let's break it all down, shall we? Stay tuned. Let's start this video about Chinese aviation with a very brief history lesson, because it actually includes a quite cool, although maybe somewhat questionable story about the first recorded example of human flight. The story goes that back in 559 AD, Emperor Wen Xuan had a penchant for flying kites, but not just kites by themselves. He also allegedly made prisoners strap kites in the shape of owls to their backs and then had them leap off a really high tower. Now, the result was as grim as you might expect, except for one prisoner called Yuan Han Tao, who, according to the story, actually survived this ordeal. And not just survived, he allegedly flew an impressive 2.5 kilometers after the drop, making him possibly the first person to successfully fly a glider. Now, that's an impressive claim, but by no means China's only aviation-related success story. Instead, one of the biggest stories of recent times is the actual growth of aviation within China itself.
Thank you to AnyDesk for supporting PBS. Hey everyone, before we get started, we wanted to let you know that we have special limited edition new merch in honor of the 50th anniversary of the Space Shuttle patent. More info at the end of the episode. Dark matter has eluded us for many decades. Even our most advanced particle colliders and sophisticated underground detectors have come up short. But it may be that we can finally solve this mystery with a much simpler experiment involving a ray of light, a good clock, and the planet Mars. Over 80% of the mass in the universe is in the form of some mysterious, invisible, unseeable substance that, for want of any idea whatsoever what it is, we call it. At first, many of us thought that it was just some sort of regular stuff that wasn't easy to see. Maybe lots of small, dense, non-shining bodies like brown dwarfs or neutron stars or even black holes. But as we ruled out most of the possible mass ranges for these, more and more of the dark matter hunting has been about finding some kind of exotic particle, neutrinos, axions, etc. But again, after years and years of looking for the dark matter particle, we're in the same place with this hypothesis. There's just no credible evidence in favor of any hypothesis for what dark matter really is. It's like when you look for your keys in the usual spots and don't find them, so you start checking under the couch, under the cat, inside the refrigerator, but when you still don't find them, you go back and double check your pockets. So maybe dark matter was in one of the obvious places all along, and there are indeed a couple of pockets still to check, where by pockets I mean ranges of masses for compact bodies. The most promising underexplored range is 10 to the power of 17 to 10 to the power of 23 grams, roughly the mass range of asteroids. Now, dark matter can't be asteroids because there's no conceivable way to make 5 times the mass in asteroids that there are in stars. After all, asteroid material is made inside stars. There just aren't that many stars, and also dark matter had to be around before the first stars. But there is an option for a truly invisible object in that mass range, and one that would have been around since near the beginning, and that's the primordial black hole, the PBH. These days, black holes are formed in the depths of massive stars, and their masses start at around 3 times the mass of the Sun. But as we have seen before on this show, there is a way to produce asteroid-mass black holes, and that's right after the Big Bang. Back then, there were tiny variations in the density of the hyperdense sea of matter and energy that filled the universe. Some of these would later collapse into galaxies and galaxy clusters, but right at the beginning, the most dense such regions could have collapsed directly into black holes. These primordial black holes could have a wide range of masses depending on yet unknown details about the very early universe. But if we tune our Big Bang parameters just right, we can get enough PBHs in the right mass range to account for all of dark matter. Not only have we talked about PBHs before, we've talked about PBHs as dark matter, and we've talked about the possibility of detecting PBHs from the scars they might leave as they pass through the Earth or even the Moon. But such a detection is going to take quite a bit of luck. The Earth and the Moon make pretty small targets on the scale of the solar system, and distinguishing the scars from old PBH impacts isn't necessarily so easy. But it turns out that we may not even need PBHs to hit planets in order to detect them. Recent studies have shown that our entire solar system may serve as a giant PBH detector.